Under the sweltering Texas sun, traffic on Highway 83 slowed to a crawl, but not because of an accident. Something much smaller, much wilder, had brought cars to a halt. A tiny bobcat kitten, desperate and determined, stood in the middle of the road, refusing to retreat. Officer Sarah Winters had seen her share of strange calls, but nothing like this. As she approached the trembling creature, she realized it wasn't just lost or injured. It was trying to tell them something. And when she saw the glint of metal strapped to its leg, she knew. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a mystery was waiting. What could a wild bobcat possibly be leading them toward? And why did it seem to be waiting for help? What started as a routine highway patrol would soon become a life-or-death search. The summer sun scorched the West Texas countryside. Mirages shimmered on the asphalt of Highway 83. Traffic flowed steadily. Drivers heading north to Abilene or south to Dot. None of them knew what was happening on the roadside. Officer Sarah Winters adjusted her Stetson, squinting at the notes on her cruiser screen. At 34, she'd spent 11 years with the Texas Department of Public Safety. Wildlife calls were rarely urgent, but this one felt different. A small, aggressive animal disrupting traffic? That wasn't normal. Dispatch, this is Unit 247. Responding to the wildlife incident at Highway 83, mile marker 143. ETA, 3 minutes. Roger that, Officer Winters. Be advised, more calls are coming in. Motorists report a juvenile bobcat behaving unusually. That got her attention. Wild animals fled from highways. They didn't approach them. Something wasn't right. She spotted the cluster of vehicles before she even reached the scene. Drivers standing outside their cars, pointing, filming. Sarah pulled in behind the last vehicle, her cruiser lights flashing. The hot Texas air hit her like a wall as she stepped. Adjusting her utility belt, she approached a middle-aged man in a Dallas Cowboys t-shirt. "Afternoon, sir. Officer Sarah Winters, DPS. What's going on?" The man wiped sweat from his brow. "Ma'am, baby bobcat over yonder," he said, pointing toward the median. "Been trying to cross for 20 minutes. Runs out, then retreats. Almost caused a pile-up when a semi braked hard to miss it." "Anyone try to approach?" "No, ma'am. Wild animal. Plus, it seems distressed. Like it's trying to get our attention." Sarah thanked him and walked toward the median. Her hand rested instinctively on her holster. She spotted it, a small bobcat kitten, maybe a few months old. Dusty-coated, pacing at the edge of the median. It darted toward the road, then backed off again and again. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, almost frantic. She raised her binoculars. That's when she saw it, a small device strapped to its hind leg, with a blue marker. This bobcat wasn't fully wild. Back in her cruiser, she radioed the Texas Parks and Wildlife Office. 20 minutes later, a white pickup truck arrived. A familiar logo on the side. Dr. Stephen Mitchell stepped out. Wiry, sun-browned, sharp-eyed, regional wildlife biologist. "Appreciate you coming out, Dr. Mitchell." "Call me Stephen," he said, shaking her hand. Dispatch mentioned a tagged bobcat. That's rare. Sarah filled him in as they walked toward the animal. "There," she pointed. Device on its leg. Stephen raised his binoculars. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "That's not one of ours." "What do you mean?" "We use neck collars. This is different. And that blue marker." The bobcat saw them. Instead of running, it came closer, 30 feet out, and made a small, urgent sound. Then turned toward the forest, stopped, looked back. I've worked with wildlife for 25 years. I've never seen this. He squinted at the tag. May I borrow your binoculars? He read aloud, RW7734. His face went pale. That's not a wildlife tag. That's an emergency location marker, usually given to hikers. Sarah froze. Why would a bobcat have a hiker's beacon? Good question. Stephen returned to his truck. 5 minutes later, he came back, grim. I just spoke with the ranger station at Fortress Ridge State Park. They've had a missing hiker since yesterday. Name, Robert Whitley, 42, solo hike, missed check-in last night. Sarah's breath caught. Marker number? Matches. RW, his initials. 7734, his campsite. The bobcat paced again, then looked at them expectantly. It's his bobcat? Sarah asked. Could be. Robert's a wildlife rehabilitator, specializes in big cats. So this was a rescue? Possibly. Then where's he? The bobcat mewed, louder this time, and started walking toward the forest. Sarah made her decision. I'm going. If there's a chance it knows where he is. I'm coming too, Stephen said, grabbing supplies through his truck, the search and rescue kit. Sarah radioed dispatch. Potential missing persons case. Bobcat may be leading us to the subject. Dr. Mitchell and I are proceeding. Copy that. Backup is 30 minutes out. Search and rescue en route. The bobcat trotted ahead, checking that they were following. They crossed into the woods. The temperature dropped. Oak and juniper shaded the forest floor. The bobcat stayed 50 feet ahead, visible, but just. It's sticking to the path, Stephen noted. That's not normal behavior. They found boot prints, fresh. A mile in, a clearing. Flattened grass. A broken strap. Blood on the leaves. A drop-off. 30 feet down, in a ravine. A motionless human form. Robert Whitley, Stephen called out. The man moved, weakly raised an arm. He's alive! Sarah radioed dispatch. We've found him. Ravine near mile marker 143. Requesting medevac. Copy that. Rescue ETA 45 minutes. Stephen and Sarah made the descent. The bobcat, agile and graceful, followed. Robert's leg was pinned by a fallen tree. Face pale, dehydrated, but when he saw the bobcat, a weak smile. Nova, he whispered. Good girl. Nova nuzzled his hand. Sarah and Stephen worked quickly. Water, first aid. What happened? Sarah asked. Storm. Lightning hit a tree. Spooked Nova. Tree fell. Trapped my leg. I couldn't reach the beacon. So I strapped the marker to Nova's harness and told her to find help. You trained a bobcat to find help, Sarah said in disbelief. Not trained. She was raised around people. Part of her rehab. She associates roads with humans. Humans with help. Stephen shook his head, amazed. You improvised a bobcat rescue. I had faith in her, Robert said. The next hour passed in a blur. Search and rescue arrived with equipment and a stretcher designed for ravine extractions. Nova stayed close to Robert, but didn't interfere. Watchful, calm. Sarah couldn't stop watching her. This wasn't normal behavior for a wild animal. This was something else. Robert was stabilized and prepped for evacuation. Before they carried him out, he reached out, his voice hoarse. Someone has to care for her. She's not ready for full release. Stephen nodded. I'll take responsibility until you recover. You have my word. Relief washed over Robert's face. Thank you. Her carrier and supplies are at Fortress Ridge, Site 7734. Nova let out a soft cry as they lifted him onto the stretcher. Sarah knelt beside her. It's okay, girl, she whispered. He's going to be all right. And you did. Man's life saved by Bobcat companion. It spread fast, from local outlets to national news. An animal rehabilitator rescued by the very creature he was preparing to release. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself driving to the Austin Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about Nova. Her sergeant suggested a follow-up visit as part of their community outreach program. She jumped at the chance. The center sat on 20 acres just outside Austin. Modern buildings, naturalistic enclosures, peace and quiet everywhere. A young volunteer led her to a sunny room where Robert Whitley sat in a wheelchair, his healing leg propped up. "Officer Winters," he said warmly, extending a hand. "Nice to finally meet properly. Last time I was a little indisposed." Sarah smiled, shaking his hand. "Call me Sarah. And you handled a compound fracture better than most people handle paper cuts. Dot." Robert laughed. "Adrenaline helps. That, and knowing Nova found help, that was better than morphine." "How is she?" Sarah asked. His face lit up. "Why don't you see for yourself? It's almost time for her afternoon training." They moved outside to a large enclosure. Dr. Stephen Mitchell was already there. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Stephen's been visiting twice a week," Robert explained. "He says he's never seen anything like her. Wants to document her case." "Sarah," Stephen greeted her. "Good timing. You're just in time for the show." Inside the enclosure, Nova moved with precision, graceful, confident. She'd grown in just a few weeks. No longer kitten-like, but adolescent, stronger, wiser. "She's getting big," Sarah noted. "They grow fast," Robert said proudly. "She's thriving." Stephen opened a small gate and led them to a protected viewing area inside the enclosure. Nova noticed them immediately, her gaze fixed on Sarah. "She remembers you," Robert said with quiet surprise. "That unusual?" "Very. Bobcats don't typically distinguish between humans, unless they've had significant contact. But Nova, she's different." Sarah felt it too, that connection again. She stepped closer. "What happens to her now?" Robert exchanged a glance with Stephen. "That, a complicated question." "She challenges everything we thought we knew about rehab," Stephen added. "Normally, we minimize human interaction. Release as soon as possible. But Nova's ability to balance wild instincts and human connection, it's rare." Robert continued. "We're launching a new program, Wildlife Ambassadors, for animals who can't be released or are uniquely capable of bridging the gap between wild and human worlds." "And Nova would be your first?" Sarah asked. "She's perfect for it," Robert nodded. "She has selective bonds. She learns, she communicates. And people already know her story. They watched as Nova worked her way through a puzzle in the enclosure, solving it quickly." "She's smart," Sarah whispered. "The rescue wasn't just luck, was it?" Robert shook his head. "Not the way people think. You don't train a bobcat like a dog. You work with instinct. You build associations. Roads mean humans. Humans mean help. That tracking device meant me." "I didn't know if it would work," he admitted. "It was a last-ditch hope." "Well," Sarah said softly, "it saved your life." "And changed hers," Robert added. "The attention brought in enough donations to fund the program for 3 years. We're building a facility. Visitors can learn about Texas wildlife through animals like Nova, those who can't return to the wild." "Speaking of publicity," Stephen added with a grin, "the governor's office called this morning. They want to honor both of you at the State Conservation Gala next month." Robert looked genuinely embarrassed. "I told them Nova deserves the award, not me." Stephen chuckled. "They said there's no official way to give state honors to a bobcat. But they're putting her on the new Texas Wildlife Conservation license plate." Sarah laughed. Who would have guessed? That tiny trembling bobcat blocking traffic, now a state symbol. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a crowd at the grand opening of the Texas Wildlife Ambassador Center. She was the department's official representative, but she would have come anyway. She needed to see what had become of Nova's story. The center was stunning, a mix of wild and accessible. Natural habitats, wide enclosures, educational displays explaining how each animal came to be part of the program, injuries, human imprinting, or in Nova's case, something rare. An animal too wild to be tame, too human-aware to release. Her enclosure was the centerpiece, spacious with trees, rocks, and a winding steep. It felt like her natural home, but it was also a place where people could meet her, learn from her. At the ceremony, Robert stood beside the governor. Now fully recovered, he walked with a slight limp, a reminder of that day in the ravine. But his voice was clear and full of purpose. He told Nova's story, how a bobcat helped save his life. Then he turned towards Sarah. "And Officer Winters," he said to the crowd, "represents the best of who we are." She didn't dismiss an animal as just wildlife. She recognized intelligence. She acted. The applause was warm, genuine. Later, as the crowd thinned, Robert led Sarah to a quiet observation room. Just the two of them and Nova. She lounged on a high rock, golden eyes alert. "She's become quite the celebrity," Sarah said. "Yes," Robert nodded, "but more importantly, an ambassador. People hear her story, they donate, they support habitat preservation, and they start to think differently." One bobcat has done more for Texas wildlife conservation in 6 months than a decade of campaigns. Sarah watched Nova stretch, then slowly walk toward the glass. Their eyes met again. That same connection, that same quiet intelligence. "Do you ever wonder what she's thinking?" Sarah asked. Robert smiled. "Every day. But I've learned to respect the mystery. Animals aren't just reflections of us. They're different, complex, worth understanding on their terms." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the center. Sarah thought back to the day on Highway 83. A strange report, a traffic jam, a tiny bobcat refusing to give up. That call had changed everything. Robert's life, Nova's path, her own perspective, and now perhaps thousands of others. "You know," she said, "in 11 years on the job, I've never had a case like this one." "I should hope not," Robert grinned. "Once in a lifetime is enough for me." They stood in silence, watching Nova, once a frightened kitten seeking help, now a symbol of what's possible when humans choose to listen. She approached the glass again, pausing just in front of Sarah. Their eyes met one last time, not wild, not tame, something in between, something extraordinary. As Nova turned away and melted back into the trees of her enclosure, Sarah smiled. Some stories stay with you forever. This was one of them. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because sometimes the wild has more to teach us than we ever imagined. And we have many more stories to share.